Welcome to the wait. Is that a hat? Welcome to the Divorce Dad Playbook podcast. I'm Dan Levy, and I don't know who the hell that is in the hat and no glasses, but I think it's my brother Scott Levy.
It's your brother. I've got a hat on because I just couldn't get my hair tamed this morning, and my glasses are being cleaned right now, so they'll be back shortly.
For those who are watching, I actually had the whole thing on me to start. so it went from like a commentary to like just a professional tease. Now everyone can see you. So
there we go.
All right.
New York.
Theme song for the day. Let's see, it's the middle of December. There's a winter storm coming, maybe two. So here you go. You ready? Yeah, there's two. Here you go. Okay, that's all I'm legally allowed to play before I get a copyright infringement. So I'm going to just stop there. Oh, you actually knew it?
Yeah, see, I got that one.
Yeah, Rocking Around the Christmas Tree. That's the Kids Bop version, which I'm sure everybody's kids out there just love the Kids Bops. Yeah, so it's funny, Scott. We got another copyright claim, which is no big deal for people who are like, we don't want to use copyright music because like it's not right. But on YouTube, on our last episode, when I did that parody of Queen with this amazing group, 613, whatever it was, doing that Hanukkah parody of Bohemian Rhapsody, YouTube gave me a copyright claim saying that we're not allowed to use that because of the melody. So I put in a fair use claim. So now I'm just screwing with YouTube. I'm going to see exactly how many seconds it takes for them.
I feel like I got to have some friends at Google that can help us out with this. This is ridiculous.
I thought maybe you would have some friends at Google too. Speaking of legal issues, that's why I started with the legal spat we're in with YouTube right now. We have our first of hopefully many appearances by Alexandra Rigden, who is now my personal attorney, I think. And I should have had her 10 months ago. Let's put it that way.
Well, I don't want to spoil what she's going to say, so it'll be interesting what she's going to say and the advice she's going to give to everyone in the audience. But wait, what does she go by? Because she goes
right. Her name is Alexandra, and I asked how she wanted to be. That's her on the website, so it's consistent. She does go by Lexi, and that's both like personally and professionally. We have a mutual friend in common, so I wanted to make sure that it was on the up. Yes. So if you see her out on social media, or if you see her, posting about our show and whatnot, and you see a woman named Lexi Rigden, that's her. But people are professional; they go by the name they go.
Yes.
Before we get to the
versus her preferred, gotcha.
Colloquial.
We can call her Lexi.
I'm gonna call her what she asked me to call her, which is the best lawyer. No, I just said she's amazing. And she is one of the more well-known or utilized lawyers down near me. And we talk about this on the interview, but it's not just a divorce lawyer, it's family law, and there's a lot that goes into that. So you'll listen to that. We're going to do like maybe 2-3 minutes on the front end, because I do want to bring something up to you that you addressed on our Instagram account over the weekend. And then we'll play the interview, and then you and I have some stuff. There's a huge announcement I have on the back end of the interview, which I'll get to in 1 second. But first, we made the joke. We posted the Reels video on Instagram this weekend, Scott, that was me saying, when you date a woman and you talk about her on your site, she doesn't want to date you anymore. But when you talk about someone in your family, they want to sue you. And great job out of you. Your suggestion is that we get a family lawyer who we have on the show today to specifically talk about how our children can emancipate from us. Are you fucking kidding me? Explicitly.
I did not say that. I did not say that. I said, jokingly, because I knew we were going to have a great guest today. That's not true. And I said, we don't want that to happen. As a matter of fact, I sat on a plane next to a 15-year-old who was talking to me on the plane that he was emancipated. That was it. I wasn't talking about our children.
Yeah, but false. I believe that you were. This is
no. I was not. By the way,
can I just read the comment
to it? My ex even responded on it. I was not saying that.
I wonder if we could find. And I can mute you. By the way, I mean just remember that I haven't done it yet. But if you, I mean,
I'm
you're
sipping
making
my
up lies.
Okay.
I wonder if we could find an expert attorney to come on the podcast who focuses on just the kids. I sat next to spelled two wrong. An emancipated 15-year-old boy on a flight back from LA last year. #kids of divorce. To which I said, do not give anyone in this family any goddamn ideas.
Dude, you read things way differently than I write them.
Dan at divorce.playbook.com.
Which by the way, is just a common thing. Forget about you and me.
Sure.
In divorce, because I'm sure you're going to say something about, I think communication is the key to everything. I do think
I never say that. That's you.
And
go ahead.
I said,
I know what you meant. I know. I got you on that one. Go ahead. Keep going.
God, you're such an asshole this morning. Since we're already
you had the weekend that I had. If you had the weekend that I had, I think you'd be an asshole.
It's everyone had a weekend, dude. We all had weekends. We all had stuff going on. It's not just
everyone had a weekend. How esoteric of you. How fourth dimension of you. Everyone had a weekend. Yes, everyone had a weekend. If you had a weekend that ended and started the way that my weekend ended and started, maybe you would feel differently about joking around about having lawyers come on to emancipate your children.
I was not joking. I was simply stating two facts in one post. That was it.
Guilt by association, then, man. Those facts are intertwined,
dude.
All you had to do is follow that up by saying, because we don't want that to happen to you. That's all I'm saying.
Or you could have just texted me and said, I don't understand what you're doing. Or you could have actually posted there instead of accusing me of saying
fights in public or what get people to pay attention to.
Said, what exactly did you mean by that? Because clearly my kids are and if you were looking at Facebook and our accounts, my ex replied.
Yeah, I replied to her too. About Jack being able to. Yeah, she said that Jack can stay with her and the dog forever, and I said that's
I
awesome.
didn't see that.
Yeah, they could stay. Jack can stay with either of us, except you apparently.
No, that was on a different one, but whatever.
Anyway, that's the one I replied to. I do want to say, and I'm not going to get into specifics because I want to get to this interview as quickly as possible without us like somehow jumping through the internet to strangle one another. I am at a bit of an impasse, and I don't really know what to do. And I'm being serious about this. Like, and I'll throw the question out to everyone, and I'll ask you to answer it, and then we'll go. I'm not going to even comment on the other end of this guy. I'm just going to throw the question out there. What do you do when you believe that your children have been worked, have been given information that, you know what, back up. Let me rephrase this. What do you do when your children have been put in the middle of an argument between adults that they don't understand the nuances of, and so they're picking a side because they're essentially hearing that side? Who cares who's right and wrong for now? I mean, obviously, if it's something serious, okay, I'll grant you that. But for an argument between a divorced couple, or if they're still a couple, what do you do when you feel like your kids have been manipulated?
Well, I think that can happen in so many ways. I also think that it really depends upon the kids' ages. I can only speak to my experience. And in my experience, I've done two things. I've generally spoken to the kids about, you shouldn't be put in the middle. Sorry that that's happening. Obviously, we need to, it's not your fault. You haven't done anything wrong, and I need to talk to your mom. And then I go and talk to their mom. That's me. I know that's not I know not everyone's capable of doing that. I know everyone doesn't have that kind of relationship. I'm lucky that that's the case, that I can actually talk to her and work through some of these issues. But from my experience, I make sure the kids know that they're not at fault. And then I talk to the other adult in the relationship.
Yeah, I think that's sound advice. And when that doesn't work, then, I agree with you. I will just add one more.
Maybe Lexi can tell us.
I know. I say, I wasn't going to talk on the back end, but I just want to clarify one thing because it does give you a little bit more context. Specifically speaking, sidebar to that, what happens that when your kids are worked or whatever, what happens when your kids speak out of turn, yell at you, for lack of a better term, Scott, yell at you about what they think you did wrong, while they are in the room with your ex. Because what I wanted to do was send a note back after the fact and say, independent of whatever the reasoning is behind all of this kerfuffle, I would never, ever, ever let our children speak to you in that manner. And if I saw them speaking to you in that manner in front of me, I would stop them during that conversation. I would have them apologize to you, get off the phone, and I would spend probably the next 15 minutes explaining to them why that is completely unacceptable. And so to see on a video call that didn't happen, and that in fact it was the opposite, where it was essentially being, I don't want to say facilitated, but where it was being tacitly approved. I wrote half a text, and I was miserable, and I was going out that night, and I thought it was going to ruin everything. Not just my night, but like my experience with this person who I've hung out with several times. I thought it was it. I was derailed. I almost canceled because I was that bad. And I was like, you know what? Mental health, I need to power through this. I need to get through it. And I did. So I'm proud of myself for that. And I didn't send that text.
Well, that's good. Sometimes the best thing that you could possibly do, and this I can say to everyone listening, because I can't give the same advice. I know everyone's in different situations, but writing out a text and not sending it is sometimes the best thing you could do.
I will attest.
I oftentimes will actually write. I won't even put it in the text box just in case I hit send. I'll write it in my notes. Sure. And then I'll like copy and paste it over there, but I'll read it like 10 times and say like, is it really what I want to do? Is it really what I want to say? Maybe maybe I need to give this some time. And I think that that was a wise decision on your part. And I think that that's a wise decision for everyone listening, that when you are heated and you're feeling like something's off, write it down. Just don't send it.
Yeah, that is great advice. And on that note, we're going to get more advice. I was going to make the joke that this show is about to get about 40 times smarter because you're going to be gone. Alexandra, who goes by Alexi Rigden, who is a family lawyer, divorce attorney. She's going to come on and she's going to set us straight. So let's do that. And then you and I know you have I know you already watched the interview, and I know you have a lot of comments because you've gone through this certainly much longer than me, and you did have a lawyer at the time. But this is great. I mean, all of our experts are great, but this is one of those that I think, Scott, we're finally getting to a point now where we can ask our experts specific questions. A lot of these interviews we've done sort of before it was open to everyone. We got friends and relatives and stuff asking questions, but now it's like general population. We got like Gen Pop questions coming. And I think we try to get as many of those into this interview as possible. So let's get to that. You and I will talk about how great she is on the other end.
Look forward to it.
I'm so happy to have somebody who actually knows what they're talking about on the show, not just me and my brother. Alexandra Rigden, who is, from what I gather, like a high-powered divorce attorney in my area. I should have used you.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish you had. Thank you.
So do I. And we'll talk about that in a second. My first question for you is, did the billable hours start when we got on the phone or when I started recording? How does that work?
Before, in the prep. Yeah, in the prep for this podcast.
I should have been a
No,
little
I'm just
bit
kidding.
more
This
concise.
is on the house for you. For you, it's on the house.
I really appreciate it. We have so much that we could cover with you, obviously. And you and I have talked before we started recording about the just immense amount of information that you need to know as someone who is going through a divorce or has already been through a divorce. So I feel like I want to kind of cherry pick this time that you're on and sort of ask a few questions that have been asked to us. And then we can go into more depth, as we go along. So the first question, though, just to introduce yourself a little bit, I said, people down here near us sort of know that you have a good reputation in terms of helping people through their divorce. But you have gone through this yourself, right? You have sort of intimate knowledge of this.
I do. And I'm divorced. And I always tell people you don't have to have cancer to be a good oncologist, but it's certainly any little bit of information to inform you to deal with human issues, obviously is helpful. So it certainly brings a unique, not necessarily unique. There are plenty of divorced attorneys out there, divorce attorneys, but it gives me an ability and some street cred and some clout to be able to say, you're going to be okay. It's one thing having your happily married best friend say, oh, you're going to be fine. But it's another thing to have somebody who's been through it say, listen, you really are going to be okay. You'll come out the other end. I know what I'm talking about, because it removes a client's ability to say, you don't understand, because I do understand.
to that point, which do you think, and maybe it's just they go hand in hand, but which do you think has happened more? Did your career inform your own divorce process, or do you think you were better at your career after having gone through that, because then you kind of feel the emotional weight of it as well?
Well, my parents were divorced and they were very amicable, and they divorced when I was very young. And so that served as my basis to try to get things done quickly, easily, amicably, without any BS, basically. And then you add on top of that the legal knowledge that I have, that I was thankfully able to not have to hire somebody, and I could draft my own agreement. And luckily I had somebody, my ex, who was, a team player in that respect. And, we did it on our own. And so it was helpful for me to have the knowledge of the know-how, that I didn't have to ask anybody for help. I was like my own handyman almost. And then it's also subsequently, because I started practicing, I was still married. And
Okay.
so I didn't have that knowledge base. And now subsequently I can look back on, what I went through and everything like that, and be a more compassionate attorney and understand a little bit more of where people are coming from. I mean, it's easy to sit here and say, you should file that motion. And, really, you got to take this all the way, run 100 yards with this. But as somebody who, they have personal lives, they have things that they need to balance. And it's not always in the best interest of the kids or the future co-parenting relationship to do certain things during a divorce litigation. And I'm better able to be compassionate and empathetic and understand where people are coming from now, because I went through a divorce of my own. I don't know if that answers the question or if I rambled.
100%. But what you just said actually brought up another question that I didn't think of. So I know that your firm, you have some of your own YouTubes up there, and some answer similar questions that I might ask here. But what I did notice is that it's family law. Like, we always say like divorce attorney, because those of us, especially on, people talking on this site, are either planning on going through a divorce, have gone through one, or, somewhere in that world. But family law, like to your point, what you just said, sometimes it might be the best advice to give someone to stick it out, or not necessarily stick it out, but in your point, it's not always I am facilitating people's divorces, right? There's a lot more to it when you have a family law practice.
Yeah. I mean, somebody comes in and says, I'm not sure about filing for divorce, and, they want my advice. I'm not going to say, go file. I might say, hey, have you gone to couples counseling? Is it really over? Because if it's not, there's no point in, going forward with this. But also, my point was more that when you're in a divorce litigation, somebody might have the desire to really be aggressive in what they're doing and file a motion and really, really get at the other person. And the attorney might think, hey, you should really file this motion. It's important. We got to get in front of the court. And the person may say, no, like, this is not what I want to do for my family, because I have to worry about co-parenting with this person after the divorce. And I get that more at a cellular level now that I have a divorce of my own and a child in common. It's kind of about picking your battles. And I'm able to better understand that now, because I'm sure, as you know, when you get divorced, I don't want to say your entire world opens up, but it makes you think about so many things you never thought about before. Yeah. Like, I see people getting married and engaged now, and, let's say, we're moving across the country because my husband's in the military. And I'm like, do you realize that you're probably stuck where he is for the next 18 years? And you don't think of that when the ring goes on. But if something happened, you're away from your family. I mean, it's really kind of, I just feel like it retools your brain a little bit. And I see people on social media that are in new relationships and after divorce. And I used to think, oh, how nice. And now I think, gee, I wonder how that's going. I wonder how the blending of the family's going. It really opens your mind up to a much bigger universe of good things and bad things, I think.
Well, I was going to say, parenthetically, in terms of this whole process of divorce with online dating, like, it's amazing to me to see people who are like willing to relocate. I'm like, well, that's important, because you live in Pittsburgh and I am not moving there because I live 6 miles from my kids. Exactly. And that's too far.
Exactly. Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you.
It's really, I think it's different. And that you bring that. I think it's different when you have gone through this, especially in that regard. But what we're going through now is very unique. And I think there's something that you probably couldn't prepare for. And so we talked about this, and this is actually a little bit of the genesis of what sort of started the site. Is my brother was getting calls from friends of his that are like, I can't deal with my wife anymore. I think I want to get a divorce. This COVID thing is killing us. What do I do? And so I think that sort of the optimistic side of people want to think like, oh, it's an opportunity to be present and be more with your family and refocus on those relationships. And I think with your kids, certainly we talk about that on our show. With your kids, it is, you get more time with them. They're home from school. But sometimes with your spouse, it's a nightmare. And so how has this impacted your business in terms of most businesses are struggling because the economy isn't great, but it's probably going to be a good time for a divorce lawyer, I would imagine.
You know, I have actually found that not to necessarily be the case anecdotally. I think that when this all first happened in March, people were shell-shocked. They were afraid to do anything. They were afraid of losing their jobs. They probably still are. The economy has thankfully done better, I think, than a lot of people expected. But I think that for people who were on the fence, I don't know if it was necessarily a catalyst for change or it was an opportunity to retrench and say, oh my God, the world is scary. I can't do this to my spouse or my kids right now. And I don't want to spend money on attorneys. So I think there were a lot of people that, you know, I know people in particular, you know, that I'm thinking about who I won't call out, who would say, you know, I think when all of this is over, I'll probably, and I've said to them, well, this isn't over. I mean, this is continuing. So what your decision is going to be, it's going to be. But also there was a misconception that the courts weren't open for business. And that really wasn't true. I mean, they're still open for business in the family law realm, mostly virtually, but people are still getting their divorces and still having their trials and everything like that. I have not seen an uptick in necessarily divorce. What I have seen an uptick in is parents fighting about, should we do school virtually? Should we do hybrid? Who makes the decision? You know, you're a doctor. I don't want the kid with you because you're exposed to COVID patients. Oh, yeah. That was much more prevalent in the beginning. And unfortunately, there were really no right answers. There would be emergency applications filed where somebody would say, my ex is a doctor. I don't want the kid with him, you know, until this is over. And one judge on a different day may say, hey, that's fair. And then another judge might say, come on, you know, there are a lot of things that are dangerous, the flu, all that other stuff. I'm not going to change custody based on this. So we saw a lot of issues with that. And a lot of fear about, what if I can't pay my child support? What if I can't pay my alimony? But I haven't yet had anybody come to me and say, the pandemic ripped the lid off of how unhappy we were. And I realized that I can't quarantine with her or him for another second. That has not happened yet.
See, that's really interesting.
I will let you know when it does, though, because the media keeps making it seem like it will. And I don't know any, and I have a lot of friends that practice family law. I have not yet had somebody tell me that that's happened.
But that's really interesting because we have, you know, and maybe it's to your point that you said before of people thinking about it and not necessarily pulling the trigger. I know that when we first talked, you mentioned that you have sort of an off season and a busy season in terms of when you're when people are coming to you for that. And I know this happened to me, which is kind of funny if you think about it, because I think when this whole like lockdown pandemic part of it is looked back on in history, I'm going to fall into those statistics because my ex, I think we signed papers in January or February, early February. But by the time it got into the court docket, the court did shut down for a little bit. We didn't actually do our little what to do in front of the judge on the phone until the beginning of June. And so when you're looking at like all the divorces during COVID, like we're going to fall into that, even though it had nothing to do with that at all.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Is what it is. But we did discuss my situation, and obviously this, still burns a little bit because we're in the holiday season now. And I found out after or during the divorce process that essentially I had no shot at reconciling, and my ex basically just wanted to make sure that the kids had a great holiday and it wasn't ruined by what was going on with us, which is a noble thing in theory. But when you're the other person, it sucks. Yeah. And so does that, I get the sense that is a lot of this. Like people are like, let's see if the holidays can save our marriage. And then afterwards in January, you're getting a lot of like, nope, this is over.
You know, I think it's almost kind of like, I'll start my diet on January 2nd. You know, it's like people don't want to, it's kind of, people don't want to deal with this at this time of year. They don't want to have an awkward Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. They don't want to be, I mean, who wants to go in December when you're trying to buy gifts for your family and pay a lawyer's retainer and have to deal with that? And so I think that people just figure, I'm going to finish out the holiday season. And then in January, I'll hit the ground running and change my life, like we all do with our New Year's resolutions. The other thing is that the courts are very slow this time of year too. I mean, the judges, I have a judge that on a case where I was trying to reschedule something and his secretary said, sorry, as of Monday, he's gone for the rest of the year. And so it's not only people aren't really filing for divorce that much this time of year, but people also don't want to file. People that are already in the process, they don't really want to be filing their motions, and the court's on or off around to hear them. So it's a combination of things. But November and December definitely are very slow in our practice. And then January and February start ramping up. And then I would say March to October is our busy season with maybe some, I don't even want to say lulls, but maybe some not as busy times during the summer. But I've been doing this for almost 8 years, and it pretty much always tracks that way every year, even with COVID, really.
It's funny because I don't know why this popped into my head, but it's sort of the opposite of when there's, a hurricane or something, or a team wins the World Series, you always hear like, well, there's going to be a lot of babies born in 9 months. And so it's one of those things where it's like the process began on this date, but it didn't end until this date. I feel like that's the same thing for divorce. Like the process begins in October, but you're going to wait until January. So like there's that incubation period of divorce, which again, being in that last year is terrible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some people are unhappy for years and years and years. And so the incubation period could probably be as long as the marriage for some people.
Unfortunately, I've learned that myself.
And it's with the divorce complaints for reconcilable differences, you have to say that you've had irreconcilable differences that existed at least 6 months prior to filing the complaint. And I often get, well, it's been longer than 6 months. I'm like, I get it. The statute says 6 months. It doesn't matter if you've been unhappy for 20 years, but people often point that out to me. And I say,
like they want it on record.
Have to rub it in.
Yeah, I put up with this jackass for 14 years.
Exactly. It has been, far more than 6 months. I'm like, I know, I get it.
So to that point, this is actually a two-part question. The first part's a little bit silly because I always look at the statistics, 50% of marriages end in divorce and whatever. And my thought always was like, and I said this at the time, like my ex at the time and I were married, and like her mother had been divorced like 2 or 3 times. So if you combine those two people, 50% of those marriages ended in divorce. But how many people, is this like a realtor? Like when you're somebody's lawyer and they go through the divorce process, most of the time you have less contact with them once everything is signed and agreed upon. How many repeat customers do you have? Like how many of your people are like, hey, 4 years later, 5 years later, like, well, I got to downsize again because I'm going to be single.
Well, I would say that the repeat customers are more, I did your divorce, and then a year later you had an issue with alimony, equitable distribution, children, something like that. It's not necessarily, I did your divorce and then I'm coming back to you for yet another divorce, and with somebody different. Because also I've been doing this 8 years. That would be a relatively, not unheard of, obviously, but like we have relatively quick turnaround time to have gone through all of that. Yeah. So mostly the repeat customers are, you did a good job with my divorce and now I have a post-judgment issue, or my niece and her baby daddy are fighting and I want to, that's mostly
referrals to other family members. That's a good point too. I imagine that divorces, and this is anecdotal as well, but I imagine divorces are a lot like tattoos. Like it's difficult to come to terms with the first one, but then after that, like the next ones are easier. So like if you get somebody who's on like divorce 3 and 4, they're getting like a peacock on their shoulder or something, like just something stupid. Like I've been married for a week. Can I get a divorce again, please?
It is funny because people will sometimes say, I've been through this before. I know I have to fill out a case information statement, and they're, they're not frequent flyers but they're a little bit savvier as to what's going on, and they've been through the mill before. But it's always, it's funny. I've actually thought about this, and you hear about so many divorces in our society, but usually we have to put in our divorce complaints if the people were married before and how their first marriages end. And the vast majority of people that I do divorces for are either it's their first time being married, and maybe they've been married for 40 years, which has happened. I have had 2 cases where people are elderly, like in their 80s and 90s, and I won't get into it, but it's crazy. But most of the time I don't see people that have been, like, oh, she was married, her 7 prior marriages ended in divorce, or her 3. most of the time I don't actually see that. And it surprises me because I thought I would actually see that more. I mean, my dad was married 3 times, including to my mother. And so maybe I just grew up thinking that was,
Right.
that was what everybody did. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
And so, but I wanted, that was the sort of joking part about how many times you have repeat customers, but you brought it up at the beginning of that. So I do want to get to the more serious thing because this is something that we talked about on the site, and certainly people ask us about, I know friends of mine, but also people who are, reading the site and listening to the show. At what point do you see your clients coming back to you to deal with either alimony payments or child support, or even just like someone I know had an issue where they felt like I don't want to get into too many details because I don't want to out what happened, but they felt that too many times their ex was putting their kids in physical harm by the activities that they were doing, that there was actual physical danger to their children. And my brother always says, that you need to talk it out. And I laugh at that because sometimes the people aren't going to listen when you talk it out. So at what point do you need to go back to your lawyer and be like, look, this is a safety issue. I don't care how much money it costs me. I need you to get the judge to tell this guy he can't keep doing this to my kids, or with my kids, I should say.
Well, it's kind of impossible to answer, only because if it's really important to you, go back to your lawyer and at least have a conversation. If this is something where, if it's something where you can live with yourself if you let it go. And it's not even just about safety. It's about anything, alimony, child support, anything. I mean, if it's really important to you and you have a question about it, go back to your lawyer. If you can live with it not being resolved, then I guess try your best to deal with it. But it really depends on the person, and it depends on the situation. Obviously, if I know that somebody is driving, if a client's ex is driving drunk with the kids, that's obviously not something you can just blow off. But if it's I don't like that my kid is taking horseback riding lessons, which I feel are inherently dangerous, but my ex doesn't, that's something that you kind of have to figure out in your own brain and work through. Is that really important? Is it worth bringing lawyers back in, or even just for your own, just getting a lawyer involved mentally, knowing that you have a lawyer involved yet again? Is that worth it for your mental health and for your pocketbook, or do you just let it go? And that's what I have found to be such an important life lesson with divorce and co-parenting, is letting stuff go and picking your battles. Because if you were to just get on your ex, either with an attorney or without, even on a personal level, about everything that you're not crazy about what they're doing, you'd probably be on each other all the time, because nobody's going to do things exactly the way that you would.
Okay. So that leads to my, to my follow-up on that. And this is something that my brother and I have discussed, because with my divorce, obviously I had, how many people who listen to the show, like I had mental health issues, which put me in a bad spot and put a lot of strain on my ex to the point where she just couldn't deal with it. And I understand that. It sucked, but I understand that. And I've said that on air, on record, people have that. Having said that, our divorce was amicable and we get along, and for the most part. And yet I am nervous that we got along when we got divorced. I didn't get a lawyer. I read through it. I'm smart. I looked at it. I had questions. I changed a few things here and there. Now there have been issues where we aren't getting along so much about specific parts of that, and I feel unprotected. And I'm nervous that in 10 years, if we have a falling out at some point, because it could happen, did I hurt myself in the short term, or I was trying to be amenable in the short term, but in the long term, I was not thinking about how my relationship with my ex is going to change over time. And that might come back to bite me several times. Does that kind of stuff happen? Have you, I mean, in your practice, but also just in your own experience, like, does that happen where you think, like, once the relationship between the two people changes significantly, somebody else starts dating or they get remarried, all of a sudden you're not as great as you thought you were when you were divorced?
Yeah. I have seen that happen many times. And, it's funny because I think people think that if you're amicable during the divorce, you're obviously going to be friendly after the divorce, because this is like the worst time in your life. So if you can figure this out, you can figure anything out. But I've actually seen a lot of it, the opposite being true, and I don't want to scare anybody, but I think when you're going through that and you're amicable and you're working, more bad news for 2020, and you're working toward a resolution and there's nobody else in the wings, it's easier to sort of almost continue to act like a family, even though you're going through that process, once you're actually divorced and you both have moved on, you're both living separately, you're creating new sets of friends, you're creating new rules within your household. I find that that schism for some people divides and they're less amicable. So the opposite happens. And I mean, that's just a shame for anybody that has to go through that. I think it can really go either way. Some of these divorces, though, are so amicable that you think the only place they can go is down, right? I mean, if you have like a really amicable divorce where you're practically, giving each other a hug and a kiss on the cheek once you're leaving the courtroom, what's going to get better than that? So anything that's not that good is going to be seen as a backslide.
We notarized the paperwork at my ex's attorney's office, and in the elevator on the way down, I said, "Hey, so I hear you're single. You want to go grab lunch?" I mean, she said no, but full disclosure, she didn't say yes to it. But I mean, like that's how it ended. Where it was kind of like, you know what? Like I get this, and it sucks, and I wanted to die, and I'm not even being flippant about it. But the fact of the matter is, like, that's what she wanted, and that's what she was going to get. I didn't want to make it worse for the kids and things like that. But to your point, and this has happened, and other people who have been divorced longer than me sort of chuckle when I say it, like exactly what you said. When you're in the midst of it and you're thinking about your kids, there are different things that are important to you. When you're on your own and you don't have to put up with the BS every day, you're like, you know what? I don't have to deal with this guy anymore. So why am I putting up with this? And I think that's what's kind of biting me in the ass a little bit too.
But I think back to your question about whether to go see an attorney, whether you're going to go to an attorney that gives you a 20-minute free consult, or you're going to go to an attorney where they charge a consult fee, but they can talk to you for as long as you need, which I fall into that category. If you have a couple of bucks to put toward it, it's worth it for your peace of mind, because peace of mind is priceless. A consult is not, the consult has a price, whether it's free or whether there's a price to it, but a dollar price. But your peace of mind in knowing that you did the right thing, or you at least sought out the advice at the time so that it doesn't come back to bite you. I think that that's really the most important. That's really the most important thing, is being informed. Yeah. My hourly rate's $300 an hour. And a lot of people have sticker shock about the rates for family law attorneys. And generally in this area, it's probably about $250 to $400 in South Jersey in this area. And so I'm actually on the lower end in that spectrum. Sure. And your therapist isn't going to be charging you $300 an hour to cry on their couch.
No.
So it's better to seek out the advice of someone that can actually help.
And last I checked, health insurance doesn't ever cover a divorce attorney, but sometimes does cover a therapist.
That's right. But that would be an interesting, yeah. My mental health demands that I get away from this person.
That would be amazing.
I'm going to be so much more on therapy if I don't get away from it. That would be amazing. That would be great.
Oh my God. Well, speaking of how much this costs, if it is a billable hour, you can send it to Scott Levy, care of Divorce Dad Playbook LLC. I'm not paying for this. He's paying for it.
All right.
Thank you so much for doing this. Hopefully we'll have you on all the time, because this is so valuable.
Oh my God, this was so fun. I'm a lawyer, so I can talk and talk and talk. So anytime, really. I really enjoyed it. And please, I don't mind my empty bookcase. This came from my grandfather. And
no, it's like a millennial. You're like a millennial lawyer. Nobody has books anymore.
You are so right. It's just Lexis and Westlaw. Really, that's all we use anymore. So I mean, I have my very professional looking bunny in a tie.
Wearing a tie, yeah.
Other than that, it's pending books being put in it.
Well, hopefully next time, maybe we'll even give you some random books and
exactly.
Sneak some in, and people can see like, oh, what'd she add?
So I can look more learned than I do now.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
The number of people, Scott, we have on this show who are better than both of us is growing. Certainly better than you. She's awesome.
At her job, yes, she's way better than me.
Did you like the part where I am now getting free legal advice because you're paying for it? So
no, I actually completely, that was the only thing that I disagreed with, and funny enough, that came from you and not from her. So I think she's brilliant. I think you're typical.
Couple of things in there we want to talk about before we do that, Scott. Just quick payoff on the favorite thing. After we talk about this, I know we want to get to some of the specifics because this is important to our listeners, and the other thing is nonsense. But I do have an announcement. I have found my soulmate. like 100%. Like it's over. Like lock it down, ladies. We're done. I found my soulmate. We'll get to that in a little bit. I also want to. Yeah, we have an interesting family question. So we're kind of staying in that theme today of like family law and interaction with exes and whatnot. This is gonna hit people. I got a question from a listener over the weekend. Actually, somebody who I met on one of the sites who asked me on the site about this, and I want to throw this to you. So that we're going to do in a second as well. And I know that you want to talk about certain things that we just talked about in the interview. But if you notice, and we make no bones about this, that was a 33-minute long interview. I told her 15 minutes and it's amazing, right? She was great. That not all of it is going to end up in the show, some of which professional teas being, we have a membership site. We want you to become a member and we have our experts on to help our members. The conversation is going to help everyone. We're not here to just gouge you. We want you to get help. But a lot of the really, really good stuff of like what you need to do, the questions you need to ask your lawyer, divorcedadplaybook.com. Check out the rest.
Yeah, I think that's right. She'll say something. You can see this on the site that talks about, the same thing that I went through early on, where I was asking my attorney a lot of questions that probably should have been asked to other experts that were not charging me. She charges $300 an hour. I would have been lucky if I was only paying $300 an hour, I think. And I was also paying for my attorney and my exes. So
I like how she snuck that in.
Crazy.
Kind of like, my rates are incredibly reasonable. Klondike 5. No. And actually, to be serious for a second,
for her. It was interesting because she said it. She's in New Jersey, outside of Philadelphia. I get it. For those of you that are listening across the country, rates differ for attorneys, but I think that in some of the major cities, that's probably a realistic going rate.
We talk about this on the site quite a bit, Scott, that the idea of what we're doing is to save you money, that our membership, if you get the year subscription, is what did I say? It's like
28 cents or something.
28 cents a day.
It's the spill out of your coffee.
By the way, you want to be funny? I was at Dunkin' Donuts the other day, and I had like $1.05 change or whatever, and the coin dropped, and I was like, I'm not gonna leave the money here. It's right here. I'll just open the door. There's like $4 in coins outside the Dunkin' Donuts window. Like everyone drops money. It's amazing.
Right.
So if you ever like just need a couple of quarters, just go to Dunkin' Donuts, drive through the drive-thru, and just like bring a spoon.
Oddly enough, my Dunkin' Donuts has shut down. But temporarily
inside you can't get inside, but the drive
no, well, it's only inside. There's not a drive-through. It's in a strip center. Well,
that's tough for them.
And what's interesting about it is they shut down. Shout out to Dunkin' Donuts. Hashtag Dunkin' Donuts, whatever it might be. You took my money.
Oh, okay.
And the place was closed. So you owe me $21.61.
Interesting.
We got like 9 wake up wraps. Well, we were supposed to. We didn't get anything. We ended up going to the big old place afterwards. But
if only you had a lawyer who could help you with that. I know one. I do want to say about that. I don't know. I don't want to throw a blanket over this, but I think that so far all of our experts have also been divorced. I think I'm thinking back in my head, and are all parents. That's not the case for everyone. And that kind of leads to the question that I have, because it's not necessarily about divorce. We don't necessarily just talk about divorced parenting. When I talk to people on these sites or people who ask me questions like, what is your target audience? It's called Divorced Dad Playbook. But it's not just about divorce, and it's not just about dads. It's about being a single parent, dealing with things on your own. I just want to make sure that people who are maybe coming in to listen to that, who are in the process of going through a divorce, are separated. There's so much information for you. You mentioned this on the last show. It's the smartest thing you ever said on the entire show. And I clipped it up. So hopefully that's on our Instagram for people to look at. It was something to the effect of like, this isn't just a site for people who are going through a divorce. It's for people who have already gone through one. And I didn't think about it that way because theoretically I'm still in that first year where I feel like I'm kind of still going through it. I'm not, but I feel like I am.
Yeah. Look, I think this all leads in, and I think you didn't realize you're leading into what I was going to say, so I'm just going to jump into this and keep it flowing. But I got a really interesting text or DM from the stuff we were doing, and so yes, to your point, we are here. Remember, you are very new in this, and I'm not. So we have lots of varied experiences for people out there, because a lot of people have been reaching out saying like, oh, like that was so hard. Now I'm 3 years out, I'm 4 years out. Like, I'm good. I'm like, you know what? Between year 3, 4, and year 7, I learned a ton.
Yeah.
Like it just wasn't. It wasn't maybe as always emotional specifically, but I learned a ton. However, let me read this. Let me read this to you because this is really
Well, we
interesting.
brought
And
that
I
up
have
in the thing too, with regard to like your relationship now with your ex is not always going to be
yeah,
the same, and that's a
yeah.
perfect
No,
example. Yeah,
by the way, that hit home to me because
yeah,
I actually, at the same time, everything she was saying, I think a lot of people that's going to resonate with that that you are at the height of your emotions when you're going through
right.
it, and then a few years later, you're like, oh crap, why did I agree to that? That's not good for me.
Yes.
And but at the same time, she made a good point. And my thing always was, I mean, again, things are in good position for me right now with my ex, but you get to a certain point that it's hard to go back. It's hard to go back to court. You have kids, you have a life, you have a lot of things on. You're just
Right.
trying to move forward. It's hard to go back and fix things. So it is something that's interesting to try and do your best to listen to your attorney if you need an attorney or your mediator and do things right at the beginning because it's hard to go back. And I know
Or
you'll
what
probably end
was
up
the?
talking about that. But so
Yeah.
so the quote so the DM was toxic women destroy good men too, but we barely talk about that. Unsolicited, and perhaps maybe something we had said that we were talking more about that you don't, but I don't
Should I
know,
zoom in on
maybe
my
it
eyes
was
right
something
now?
about
I'm amazed at that conversation. That's literally like half of the internet is about men complaining about toxic women. Are you kidding me? Did we
yeah.
really?
So
I'm not.
so
I'm trying to be sensitive to this. I'm sure somebody's dealt with a significant issue, and maybe you'll get to that. But like, are you kidding me, Scott? The internet isn't full of women being harassed by men and women being called toxic. Like, I don't have too much sympathy for that, but nonetheless, keep going. Sorry. Was
no,
that
I
it?
think she was making no. What's not it? So I think she was making a point, and I don't know what it was related to, but it also got me thinking. I know you and I talked about this that I want to make it clear, and potentially at some point in the future we'll make it more clear that because I've gotten a lot of other people reaching out, a lot of women reaching out to say, well, this is the Divorce Dad Playbook. Can I listen? Can I interact? Can I,
Yeah.
be a part of the community? And I'm like, of course. Like most of the stuff that's in the playbook itself, which is the site, most of the stuff that's there works for women and men.
Right.
And it's more so about having a relationship with each other, having kids, keeping the kids involved, engaged, out of the phrase, whatever it may be. And so, of course, we're there for women too. And yes, there
Was that
there
old
are
deodorant that was like pH balance for a woman or something? You remember that commercial when we were growing up? That's like made for something pH balance.
strong enough for a man, but
There you go.
yeah, isn't
How
that
did
what it
I not
is?
remember? Oh, you're an ad guy. That's why. I'm like, how did I not remember something on TV? Because you're an ad guy. You care
It's so.
about the sales. You focus more on the commercials than on the actual show.
By the way, when you say stuff like that, it's so like you always think that I belittle you sometimes when I say things. Do you know
You
how
like Don
belittling it
Draper,
is? See, now you're trying to save it by saying that like I'm some
a
handsome
sociopathic monster who was terrible to his family. Yeah, I really saved that one for you. Are you just going to
okay.
answer every question with what? 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 Have you seen the supercut of Don Draper saying what?
You just called me a sales ad guy. I haven't sold ads in like 20 years.
I mean, sales ad, like whatever, ad sales guy. It's like a thing. It's like an
Okay,
industry.
I could say the same thing about you. I could be like like
Sell ad.
creative, like whatever. Like so you
Thank
create
you. I
whatever you
appreciate
create.
that. That would be a very big compliment. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Actually, can I say I went to a group therapy thing, Princeton House. Shout out to Princeton House. And when you leave, they give you like a stone to like remember your thing by. It's something that they write on both sides, like 2 character traits. And you're supposed to look at it when you're having a tough time. And I actually look at this quite often because it's right underneath my monitor right here. The first side is, and this is my therapist who said this to me, is intelligent. So that's nice
She's
of her
intelligent.
to say. No, this is things she saw in
Oh,
me.
I thought this is her stone.
Creative on the other side. As I
There we
slowly
go.
flip that
See,
around, that was a
I
tricky
can't.
draw.
Even when I'm trying to knock you, I'm giving you a compliment. There you go. That's how nice I am.
I flip it around, Scott, when I'm struggling with something creative for the site or when I'm doing something on my own, like a t-shirt or whatever, I flip it around. So I look at, and I'm serious. This is like a mindful thing. Like I look at it and it reminds me that people see that in me. And I, it makes me feel more secure in my own abilities and skills. I haven't needed it too much lately, but it's something that, especially as I said before, this weekend, you sort of rethink things. I fell into a little bit, not a huge hole, but a little bit of a hole over the weekend. And so we can talk a tiny bit about that before we get to this question. I talked for less than 45 seconds of the final 8 minutes of the interview. And as I sent to her in a text afterwards, as a host of a show, that you like a guest when you let them take 7.5+ minutes of the last 8 minutes of your show. Her answer to the question that we asked, and you brought this up a little bit before, and I'd like to get your feedback here. What are the questions that your clients don't ask, that you think that everyone should go into a consultation with a lawyer or even an appointment with a lawyer and need to have these questions in their back pocket? And I did not know where she was going to go with this, and that's what happened. 8 straight minutes of her explaining it to me, and it's really, it could change people's entire process of going through a divorce. I mean, it's not the key to everything, but my gosh.
Yeah. I don't want to give it away because I have a feeling that that's going to be on the site. Yeah. I will just say that what I do believe, and I agree with her for sure, is even though you're oftentimes pressed and in a rush to get out of your relationship, take a little bit of extra time and do your homework and get your stuff organized and talk to the right people. I've mentioned this over and over again. When I went through this and I looked for help and I was doing Google searches, every day trying to find help, everything that came up was simply just a divorce attorney. And in this case, like she spoke really well and she's a great resource for people, but she's not the only resource that you need as you go through this. There's other things that you're going to need. And she mentioned it, we'll put it on the site. And I think that's really important, that the reality is not only do you need your friends, not only do you need an attorney or a mediator, sometimes you need a couple other experts in their own disciplines in order to make sure that you are covered. Because again, to the point of you and me, what you go through at your point in your divorce is very, very different than what I go through at my point. And if I could set it up better with the right team at the beginning, your life just gets easier as you get. It was
really a perfect answer for us. And again, we're talking around it, and the T's will be on the site, so we can talk about this guy. Part of her answer, there's several things that you should ask your attorney. Part of the answer was, to your point, like have a team around you, and that's exactly why you built this site the way you did, which is like, we're going to bring in people in all of the, we don't just have lawyers on here. We're having somebody who covers insurance. I believe actually later in the week, I think we're doing that interview throughout this week. There's everything from like what to do with a workout for your kids, how to decorate your house, how to have sex. I mean, let's be honest. We are trying to provide a well-rounded life for people. And if you've watched or listened from episode 1 through, what is this, like 18, 19, whatever it is, we've already given you a lot of information to make you a better person. That's exactly what that answer referenced. So it's kind of neat to hear that from someone, not just me and you being, sales pitchy. Okay, I do have something that I want to get to that I was asked, which I think is a really, really good conversation. I didn't tease this. We talked about Pam on the last episode, and she is a good sport because, Pam went out with a homeless person more times than I did. She sent me an email, and we're going to talk about this on the next episode. This is the cliffhanger, Scott. We're going to talk about this on the next episode because there is some depth to get into on this. She actually went out with the guy 5 times, not 3.
5 times?
Yeah.
5 times?
5 times.
It's like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. 9 times?
Yeah, well, not 9 times, 5 times. But I will say this.
You take a shower at her place 5 times?
I don't know. We can read the email. She said I can read as much as I want of the email. No, Scott, hear me out. This was a very important sort of stick in the eye of the stigma that we have given people who are without homes. This guy who she dated was like an NYU grad student. And she said he had like, I don't know if he had borderline like I do, or some sort of personality disorder that like he was just obnoxious. Maybe he was a narcissist or whatever. And he like thought getting a menial job was beneath him. And trust me, I've had those feelings. I'm not making fun of anybody who thinks like I need money. I could go to a job. It's like, no, I'm better than that. Well, am I? Is being better than that not having any money and not having a way to pay a rent or whatever?
No.
And so the guy was like crashing on people's couches and then eventually just said like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to live in my car. And it was like a choice, which is a whole nother conversation than like somebody who's out on the street because they're destitute or because of drugs or things like that. So it's an interesting conversation. And she gets into a lot of wild stuff. To your point before about like year 5, 6, 7 get different. She's been like online dating for like 10 years. So we should have her on the show and we just don't even talk. There's a dating advice. Or maybe not if she's been doing it for so long.
Right. I mean, maybe what not to do. She talked about what not to do. There we go.
But anyway, I wanted to clean that up a little bit. So we'll talk about that on the next episode because I don't want this to be
that totally cleaned it up. I thought it was bad with 3. You went to 5. Cool. Great job.
There's more to it. There's more to it.
I'll wait. I'll wait. But I was talking about that this weekend too.
Here's the payoff on the. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, just saying we entitled the last. As part of it, we entitled the last episode that, you know, again, this is always one-upping you a little bit, that if you did indeed actually hook up with a homeless person, that she went out on 3 dates. Now we can have another title to another show. It's great. It's not 3, 5.
Exactly. Well, we'll do that on the next episode. That'll be the next episode. I did get a lot of feedback this weekend, and we talk about this with the time travel thing that we've discussed, Scott, how like we're in a space now that other people aren't in because they're on episode 3 or 4 or 7 or 12 or whatever, and we're beyond that. And so somebody was actually listening to us and texting me while they were listening, which is always hilarious. And I got a text out of nowhere yesterday. Oh my God, this apple juice thing is hilarious. And I was like, what are you talking about? I've already forgotten that I had no milk and I decided to eat cereal with apple juice, which now I want to do again because it was delicious. But it's funny. So I got that. And then I got someone who I used to work with who was honestly one of my 3 or 4 closest people in my entire life at the time. We're still not as close because we don't work together. And she was just like, I just listened to the episode with the smoothie. And I'm like, what episode is this? And then I was like, oh. I just call it episode 9 and move on. It's the Star Warsy kind of thing, maybe. But she's like, I had no idea, which I find a little bit not hard to believe, but it is illuminating to me when people who are that close to me and who saw what was going on didn't realize how bad it was. And I don't know if I should credit myself for hiding it so well or be scared that I'm able to do that.
I don't think that's surprising at all.
Well, then pat on the back to my acting abilities. Soulmate alert. Are you ready for this? This is.
Yeah, I've been waiting. I've been waiting like 30 minutes for this now.
This is. I have found the woman of my dreams, and there she is. For people who are listening, tough crap, because this is the visual mana. This is the greatest profile photo I have ever come across. It is a 47-year-old woman named Kay, and that's about all you see. Because she's standing next to a Christmas tree, and it is the blurriest photo ever taken. The only photo this woman put up on her dating profile is this photo. No information except her location, which obviously I'm not going to include here, Scott, but literally the only photo on her dating profile is this. I want to marry her right now. We will have the most beautiful blurry children you could ever imagine.
That was such a letdown.
What?
It was a letdown. I thought you actually were interested in somebody real, and you showed me a blurry profile pic.
Okay, first of all, I would never out someone who I was really serious about.
I didn't on the show. Out her. I just thought maybe we're going to be talking about you had a great time this weekend, or you.
I'm not going to show you a picture of the person. That's crazy.
I didn't know you were going to show me a picture. You didn't say at the beginning of the show that you're going to show me a picture anyway. Mm-hmm. You just said I have.
I believe I did. I will say this, Scott. This is one of the episodes. You know, people. Some of these experts that we have. We find ourselves people we've known for years, people we've met. Sometimes you get recommendations from other people who you know and other people who you've met, and that's where we got Lexi. And I'm not stupid. I'm definitely not going to be like, oh, here on the episode where we just had your friend, I talked about someone who I'm actually, come on, man. I'm not an idiot. I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
You got to talk into the microphone, sir. There's a microphone in front of your face.
I was thinking.
Okay, think into the mic. Put your ear
How
up
do
to
you
it and just we
think
can
into
hear
the
the
mic?
sizzle. It's like bacon. That's you. That's your brain.
So
My
I've
bacon
been
impersonation.
I'm moving on from what you just said. So
I
I've
have
been
this. I have this
spending.
question for you, which is very important actually, and I'm being serious about. But do you know? Go ahead, say what you're going to say, and then I want to get to this. This is how this is the sort of final question for the show, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll get out. So what do you have to say?
I've just been looking through a lot of there are a lot of people that are trying to help, can use some help, and I think it goes to like the guest part of it that a lot of people are reaching out to us to want to get involved, which I greatly appreciate. If you feel like you have any kind of expertise at all and you want to work with us towards helping others, please reach out to either of us and we'll figure out a way to make it work. And again, things live on way beyond this podcast. There's a huge site with the playbook itself on there, which would be great. I thought about you actually, where I was looking through different mom and dad blogs, podcasts, and just accounts on Instagram and Facebook, and I saw this one, and it just says 4 little back and forths. It's me and a therapist conversation. I just wanted to mention this one real quick because I thought it was funny. So me, I need everyone to like me. Therapist, everyone won't always like you. Me, if I try hard enough, they will. Therapist, no.
I guess that therapist doesn't really like that person. You should get a new therapist.
I thought that was kind of funny.
Oh, by the way, I didn't even mention this to you. I actually am getting a new therapist this week. They finally called me back. Yeah, that's actually awesome. I'm a little trepidatious about it, but they finally called me back. This place that I've been going to for a little bit for medical management or medicine, whatever it is. Medicinal management, I guess. Medical management would just be like a doctor.
But did they get a new person in, or were they just trying to match you with the right person?
I had requested that around Thanksgiving I get on their list of. I had already done the intake interview. They selected one of their therapists they thought was a good match for what I'm dealing with, and they just never called me back. And I just I called and left another message. Finally, the guy got back to me this week, which is good because I felt somewhat rudderless, as I mentioned this weekend. So I think it'll be good to talk to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, other than just talking to you. To get like, I'm not even making fun of you. No, I'm not even making fun of you. It's like get feedback from someone who's trained in this is probably something I need at this point.
I wasn't going to say that. I was just going to say, don't. And you do make fun of me a lot for saying, and I understand that not everyone can communicate. It's not possible. I get it. When you can, it's great. But don't you find it slightly ironic? Maybe ironic's the wrong word. Troubling that a place that deals with mental health would sort of ghost you and not get back to you. Like, isn't that kind of fucked up?
Do you want to, I mean, a serious answer to this? That happens everywhere. It is impossible. You sit in the lobby, anyone out there, again, Scott at divorcedadplaybook.com, Dan at divorcedadplaybook.com, at divorcedadplaybook on all the social channels that you would ever go on, which means not Twitter. And I'm at Dan Levy Thinks on Instagram is the best way to, if you want to direct message me, you don't want to send an email. That's the best way. Tell us if this has happened to you every time that I've been in a waiting room when we used to be able to actually go into waiting rooms. Somebody would try and make an appointment and it would be a month, 6 weeks. Somebody would call in and be like, we don't have appointments until next year. And this is in October. Scott, the healthcare system in this country is a disaster. And for people out there who say like, oh, we didn't need universal healthcare because I like my insurance. That's not what it's about. It's not about whether you like paying what you're paying. It's about access to what you need. I've said this on the show before, and this isn't necessarily strict mental health. I will say this part. My first psychiatrist was not the woman who ended up being my best psychiatrist, because the woman who I was supposed to go to didn't have appointments for, I think, almost a month later than the woman who I started with. And I needed medication. I was at the point where like, it was like a day by day situation. Like, and I was like, just give me whoever can give me stuff. I can't do this on my own anymore. And that probably set me back 6 months, at least in my recovery, at least 6 months, which then contributed to what happened now. I'm not blaming the healthcare system for my own foibles and my divorce, but it certainly didn't help. And that was because I couldn't get in with the doctor who was best pegged for my diagnoses. And that's I told you, did I tell you? I don't even know if I said this on the show, Scott. I got a call. So I got separated in October of last year. from October through November or mid-October, I called 30, I believe, different marriage counselors in the area, insurance covered marriage counselors in the area. I got a return call from one who was available. We went to her. We're divorced. So either she did a great job or she did a shit job. That's not for me to decide. What is for me to decide is in March, I got a call from one of the places that said, hey, I just wanted to double check. I know you're on our waiting list for a marriage counselor. We have an availability this week. Do you want me to schedule you? I was like, no, I've been divorced for 3 months, lady. 3 months. How is that part of the system? So that's exactly to your point. 6 months.
Yeah. Well, look, there's some amazing people, obviously, in a variety of areas of medicine, but I do think that there are certain things that are broken. I think a silver lining of the COVID period is that things like mental health, for those people that don't have to be inpatient, telemed has been probably a blessing for a lot of people, which is great. And I'm thankful for the fact that technology has allowed us to not have to wait months and months to talk to somebody, or not have to sit in waiting rooms, etc. Not always.
Not the waiting room part, but sometimes you have to wait for an appointment.
Right. I understand, but I think it's getting better. I think technology in this case and throughout this time, because people can't necessarily go out to doctors' offices. Sure. I think telemed is a good thing, especially for people that really need to talk and get some meds and everything like that. So
we can't help with the medicines.
I do think that that there are parts of it that are broken, but again, that's just one guy's opinion.
We can't help with the
two
side
guys,
of this, obviously. Well, yeah. But we can help with some of the other stuff, and that's a good. And this is the serious thing. I'm like, we are self-proclaimed experts in a lot of things. Although I do think in some respects we are experts in certain things that pertain to our audience. What we are good at is finding people for you to connect with. And if we don't know the person, then we know someone who does. For example, like if you're not in South Jersey or Philadelphia or Pennsylvania or whatever, and you need a divorce attorney, like reach out to us. Because now we have more than just Lexi, but we have people who can put you in touch with people in your area. I have a realtor who I've been trying to get on the show. I mentioned her before, and she's like, I'm in Brooklyn. It doesn't really pertain. I'm not divorced, but my partner is going through this right now, and he lives closer to you. Maybe you guys can connect. And like that, we're trying to get him on the show at some point if he's willing to talk about what he's going, what's going through in his life right now. And so, if you have a question about any of this stuff and you need someone in these fields, we had Missy Beck on, who's a psychotherapist, and honestly, like I'm going to text her all the time with questions. I don't want to overstep, but like that's what she's here for. She wants to help she wants to help us, but she also wants to help our audience. And I think that's amazing that we're really kind of formulating this idea that we had for months and getting a really good group of people. Take advantage of that is what I'm trying to tell you. Everyone listening, take advantage of us for sure.
Yes. That's why we did it. I agree.
All right. I want to get to this question. And this is something that I've always wanted to ask you, but you have 2 boys. And so it didn't pertain. I'll read this and then I'll ask you on the other end, like what you think about this question. But here's the note I got from somebody who listened. Do you love your kids differently now that you are divorced? I asked that because when I was pregnant, someone was like, why have a child when it's not out of love for or with your partner? This woman is a single mother by choice, she said. And when I asked what that meant, I said, did you get a donor? Did you like excommunicate the father? And she said it was a little bit of both. It was a guy that she knew who didn't want anything to do with the kid, didn't want to have kids, but was willing to facilitate that. So it wasn't necessarily a donor, but it was essentially, that's important context. So she said she was asked, why have a child when it's not out of love for with your partner? You're not going to love them the same way as if you had a child with another person. Exclamation point at the end. And then she clarified by saying the person was basically saying that child rearing should be a love union because that is what makes you love your child the most. That's to say that to someone who made the very courageous choice of being a single parent. And we know how hard this is, but to be a single parent, that's a real single parent, not a co-parenting single parent where we get 50% of the time with our kids and then we get to go be humans. When you're the only parent, your life is much more difficult and your social life is almost non-existent. For someone to say that to that person is amazing. Have you ever heard anything like that?
I mean, look, people say, it's the beauty of our world right now in terms of just how everyone's got a platform, everyone can be on social, everyone can say whatever they want. To specifically answer the question that you started out with, I do not love my kids any less or any more than I did when I was married. Now that I'm divorced and a quote unquote single dad. That being said, and I've said this quite a bit, I do love them a little differently in the sense that I am way more present with my kids. And potentially, to your point, maybe it's because I have them half the time, and half the time I could get other stuff done, and being a true single parent full time. I know that there's a lot of divorced moms and dads who actually have their kids 100% of the time, which is really, really hard. Sure. For me, I would just say that I don't, again, repeating, I don't love them any more or less than I did when I was married, but I do love them differently and in a much, much, much better way. And this is as Jack, oh, by the way, he got his first acceptance into a college on Saturday.
Oh my God.
On Saturday or
wow.
Sunday. Yeah. Yeah. So he's officially going to be able to go to college, which is really nice. It was a very emotional moment for me. It was a really emotional moment for me. Actually, we talk about that another time. I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but in any case, I digress.
Should have made him go to Rutgers.
He'll never go to Rutgers. He wants to go away. He doesn't want to stay close. He wants to go away.
Okay. I'm just saying. Good school.
So,
good athletic department. Better than Michigan in football. I mean, yeah. It's a fact.
I did not mean to go off on that tangent. I feel as though, I definitely am way more present with them, and I am, with all my experiences, a much better dad than I probably was and would have been if I would have stayed married.
All right, so that does answer. This is Anna, by the way, for people who want to respond to us directly. If you want to comment to her, just it's easier to reference that. She did ask the question, do you love your kids differently now that you're divorced? It didn't ask, do you love them more or do you love them less? The person that asked her this was presupposing that you would love them less, because the child process, according to that person, is like a manifestation of the love you have for someone else. Which, by the way, let me just say this. Talk about putting pressure on your kids. Kids feel so much pressure that it's their fault. We hear this all the time. When you get divorced, it's like, oh, well, it was my fault. My parents argue all the time because of me. And kids internalize that for the rest of their lives, and it impacts their relationships throughout. And it's terrible. You should never blame your kids. This is ostensibly blaming your kids. If you get divorced, you're like, well, your love isn't strong enough to keep it through. That's mind-boggling to me. And I know people have religious beliefs and people have different beliefs about marriage and about childbirth and sex and things like that. I'm not saying that my beliefs are gospel on this. But I do think it's a little bit unfair to someone who's dealing with this on their own to be like, well, if you had a husband, you'd love your kids better. Like, what the F?
Yeah, I don't agree.
But I do see your point, though, about like loving them differently. Absence makes the heart grow fonder is the cliche. And I think when my kids aren't here, it is tougher for me. Case in point, we're doing this in the middle of Hanukkah. And yesterday, Zoe didn't come. And tonight, as we're recording this, I don't think either kid will. I think I'm going to go drop the presents off because Zoe has guitar in the middle of what would be like the time for Hanukkah. I'm going to drop the presents off at the house. I was going to drop the menorah off, and we were going to do it there and open presents together. But Zoe and I are doing like a cool video thing for the menorah, and it needs to stay in the same place or the video is not going to work. And so I think what we're going to do is I'm going to drop the presents off during the day. We'll zoom in and do the menorah and then open the presents that they'll already have at the house. And that's what we did yesterday. Zoe zoomed in, or Google Duo into the candles. And then again, when Max opened his presents, and then I just realized, well, nonetheless. And then we did that on the back end. Like when I dropped the one kid off, the other kid opened their presents. I forgot him. I'm not trying to get sued. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
All comes full circle.
It's just unbelievable.
I would say that that's part of the deal, and I know a lot of people will be doing this throughout the holiday season and Christmas too. That there will be a lot of, video. I won't call out any device because we use a lot of different things. But there's a video holiday celebration, and you know what? it's an odd year, and you make the best of it. But I do think that you do the best you can with your kids, whether you're actually physically with them or not. Oftentimes when my kids are not with me, or they're going around, looking at schools like they were this past week, I do my best, and I appreciate it when it comes back from them too. I FaceTime with them, and it makes us all feel good.
Yeah, this is my first holiday being divorced. And I know firsts are always more difficult because it's not just that it's emotional, it's unexpected. You don't know what's going to happen. You've kind of gotten used to your situation maybe, and your patterns have changed a little bit here and there, but ultimately like you have expectations of what the holidays are going to be like because you've gone through this and I have not. So to have my kid choose not to come because they had too much work or something else that they were doing is really a kick in the nuts that I didn't expect. I didn't think it was going to be that big a deal.
I have learned this over time, that oftentimes the kids just have their own lives too. And you know what? At the beginning, I always took it personally when they didn't want to come, when they wanted to spend time at mom's, whatever. And I did take it personally, and I talk about these transitions that are really hard for us as parents as well as for the kids. And I just learned over time, it actually has nothing to do with me. It's the kids that have stuff going on, and they are more comfortable at one house because they're settled in and their stuff is there at the moment and whatever it may be. And I've just learned to, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, I get over it pretty quickly. I realize, and I talk to my kids about it. I'm like, oh, do you have something going on? What's happening? Like, what's making you want to stay there? And I'm like, well, I have this going on. And usually there's always something more to it, but our minds are powerful things. So we sometimes go to the dark side.
One thing we didn't talk about, which was in the interview, was sort of how COVID has impacted divorce. And we don't really have the time to do this now. So maybe that's a future episode that we've commented on that ourselves. But I just thought that information of like the actual number, or at least, coming through, this is anecdotal because it's one law firm, but of people who are filing for divorce during COVID, I found that answer to be quite illuminating and very interesting. Yeah. But I think it does, to your point, Scott, pertain to this as well, where it's like, I have 50-50 custody, but no, I don't. It's not even close. If you do the actual math, because of COVID and because of the school situation, it's not even close. It's not even close. And so like, it's very frustrating because I can't do anything about it.
Dan, and for everyone who goes through this too, male or female or whatever, mom or dad, it's never going to be 50-50. I mean, even through mine, it's based off of nights. And sometimes when it's like during the week, like as an example, I'll have my kids, a few nights this week, but they'll then leave like right as their break starts at like 10 from school, because they're obviously doing homeschooling still. And so I don't really have them that much. Like I'm working during the week. It's hard to juggle everything. So it's never like that. You just have to, as I always say, and this is one of my favorite sayings and most pertinent ones within regards to divorce, life, kids, everything. Make the most of your minutes, buddy.
This is what I wanted to ask you before, and this doesn't necessarily pertain to you. And this is the last question I have. And we're going to throw this up as a poll, I believe, on Instagram and Facebook, because this is really, really interesting. And I asked a couple people this, which pertained to Anna's question about how you love your kids and things like that. I asked her this. I said, which is weirder? Matching with someone on a dating site who has the same first name as your parent, your mother or father, your ex, or your kid. Because there's some off limits names. Like early on, I got somebody who had the same name as my ex, and I actually wrote her back and I was like, you seem amazing. I would totally match with you, but you have the same name as my ex, and that's just a non-starter. I'm just not, I can't do it. And obviously the woman never wrote me back. I don't know if she appreciated that or hated it, but then I see stuff. I see people with mom's name and I'm like, is that weird? And then I see people with my ex's name and I'm like, that's weird. And then I see people with my kid's name and I'm bugging out. So I want to know, you don't have to deal with that as much, but I want to hear from people. I want to hear from people because which is the weirdest?
I would, in just my own, little poll from people that I've met over the years, I would say overwhelmingly, it's the kids' names.
Wow.
Overwhelmingly. From my perspective, people can prove me wrong, But I think it's kids' names.
No, I mean, I don't know the answer.
Like names. Yeah, names come and go. Your ex's name, like if it's a common name, yeah, big deal. Like maybe you can do it better with the next, ex name. But kids' names are weird because it's weird for you a little bit, and it's definitely weird for them. That's what people have told me.
Well, that's an interesting one because from what I've heard in the few people I've talked to, it's your ex. Now, I may have talked to people who have bad experiences with their ex, and that has, actually the woman Anna, when I asked her, she said, my ex 100%. She's like, if I see anyone with his name, automatic no, because she doesn't want to deal with that. But here was my thing. And she said, do people look at their kids and resent their kids? The question that was posed to her, when you go through a bad divorce, do you resent your kids because it's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Well, I asked back this, what happens when your kid is a junior and you have a terrible divorce? That's got to be tough, that you're calling your kid the same name as your ex. And frankly, that I would venture to guess that most spouses of someone who goes to a junior or a third, it wasn't their choice. Hey, you know what I want to do? I want to name the kid that's equally mine and yours, your name. I want to give you the ownership of this child. And again, like one of my best friends in the world is a third and his kid is a fourth. There's lineage, that there's tradition.
Yeah.
But
so
can you imagine if they get divorced and now she's got to call her kid the same name as her ex the rest of his life? That's got to be really difficult.
They all have nicknames. That I grew up with a Trey. He was a third. He was Trey. They call him Trey. They didn't call him David. Call him Trey.
I get that, but
so you put out a nickname. Yeah, the parents called him Trey.
Okay,
right?
And that's a good answer. That was a good, snappy, quick answer. But I don't know if most people are going to be like, hey, your father and I just got through a divorce. I know you're 10, but now I'm going to call you something else that we haven't called you the whole time. I mean, you can't just make that. I feel like we've all,
I could have dove harder into a nickname than I was previously. Like I would call my kids a bunch of different names. Like some of them probably not so nice and some of them really nice. And I could have pressed harder into a nickname if I felt that way. Obviously I got divorced. I have boys, so I didn't ever really have that problem. Right. But when I was on the dating apps, I thought about it for a second, but I never excluded somebody who had the same name as my ex.
That's interesting. And I definitely want to get people's thoughts because, as you said, for you, it's the kids, which makes sense. For the people who I've spoken to, it's the ex almost unanimously from the people I've spoken to. Now, maybe I'm dealing with some people who are more recently, out of these relationships. It could be that. But yeah,
maybe I felt that way early on. Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember.
All right. So we'll talk about that, in a future episode, because we'll throw it up, sometime during the week. It won't be today. And then we will try and get the results of that. That'll be fun. Do you have anything else today, sir?
I will repeat because this has just been in my world a lot lately. There's just a lot of people that are going through some tragedies, etc. So I will say, make the most of your minutes. Kids first.